Vite comment, bienvenue, welcome one and all to another live stream. You may be the keener amongst you will realize that we have got a meeting of minds. This is the construction superbrain. We are Cladding Matters, and today we're talking from a point of view of new knowledge having been uncovered for the statements that have been made so long by Steve, by people like Silas and Wendy and Michelle, having come to light and being ratified by the Grenfell report, long as it's been in the making. And I suppose what I want to talk about today particularly is, has anything been learned? And do we trust anyone right now? So let's start off with Hamish, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, it is. One was hopeful that at the end of a week when so much has been said by so many people about the results of what went on, as we well know, far too long ago now for the report to have taken to come out. I think the sad thing about everything that's been said, it hasn't actually in itself resolved anything. Everybody apparently still needs time to think about it. Now, one of the questions which was asked of our not so much housing minister, but one of the ministers involved with all this, she said, "Oh, in 6 months we'll have sorted everything." And the question, absolutely great, actually, the TV broadcaster turned around and said, "Well, what do we do in the meantime?" And unfortunately, it's the same thing. What are we? We have a situation here where people responsible for creating situations could actually do something about it, start doing something about it. They're waiting to find. I don't really mean to say it this way, but this is how it comes across to me. Many people who could be doing something to resolve issues are waiting for somebody to say that they have to, rather than getting on and getting it done.
While I've still got her, because her signal's a bit shonky, because she's out and about, being the guardian angel of the construction industry, as per Michelle Carr, QS to the masses. Have we learned anything?
Well, regulations have changed a lot. There's a lot it's much more stringent. It's much more strict for new buildings. So new buildings for the last 4 or 5 years have now got very, very comprehensive stuff. Everything is tested in fire conditions. Everything's got certificates. It's very extensive on cladding, and everyone gets very, very excited about it. So there is change in the construction industry. The issue is the existing buildings. And personally, for me, I think the key issue is no one can figure out who is responsible to pay for it. So ultimately, you have people that are in a block, and there could be 100, 250, 10 different properties within those blocks that needs the entire cladding to be removed and reinstalled, and it's expensive. Doing anything on an existing building is expensive, and no one can find who's liable and who needs to pay for it, and that's the problem. The people that are living in the buildings cannot pay for it. On majority of them, you wouldn't expect them to, because the costs are going to be probably the same value as some of their property, especially up in the north. And is the government going to pay for it? Probably not. It's about figuring out who's going to pay for it and how to actually distribute that into existing buildings. The new buildings are totally different. So yes, we have learned, but it's the people that are in the potentially dangerous and condemned properties that are the issue.
And with that, I'm going straight over to the incomparable Steve Day. Steve, you're right in there in the midst of it. Has anyone really taken any notice yet?
Well, I mean, we actually were lucky, going on from Michelle's point about who pays, the developer contracts that the top 50 builders signed, or developers, basically does allow for cladding to be removed at their expense, and also internal compartmentation. But the problem is the standard that is being used, PAS 9980, allows flammable material to remain. Now, the government is saying that flammable material should be allowed to remain if it's considered low risk, to take a proportionate approach to remediation, because they want their public pots that the standard applies to remediations to go further. However, in our case, our developer Barrett has alleged flammable XPS spandrel panels are low risk without any fire performance test evidence, and they claim that it's low risk on fire shafts. And the National Fire Chiefs Council have said that there should be no combustible material on fire shafts. So you have a standard which is at odds with the National Fire Chiefs Council, allowing flammable material to stay on and causing us to be exposed to permanently high insurance. So I was on the BBC National News about our development, Royal Artillery Quays, on Monday, and Property Mart, the biggest estate agent, and the Association of British Insurers have both said that if flammable material remains on buildings, we will have permanently high insurance, and it will make flats at risk of being unsellable. So this standard needs to change to be the same standard as applied to new buildings, because this material is banned on new buildings. Or the proportionate approach needs to mandate that test evidence is applied to every single piece of flammable material that is kept on the buildings. It should be totally abhorrent for people to suggest something is low risk when it's highly combustible without any test evidence. And that is the insurance issue to a T. It's just they don't trust. Unless you can present test evidence, something is low risk when it's Euro Class E. In terms of combustibility, which is the worst standard for your listeners. So that basically has meant that we are still stuck. We're going to go through 2 years of remediation, and we've got the London Fire Brigade that has just done an emergency investigation based off my findings on the plan. So I'm about to hear the results of that. So that's obviously a worry.
Steve, I was distressed to see that some members of your own community are trying to get you to quieten down, that you're somehow bringing the place into disrepute. What's going on with that?
So I was on Channel 5 News yesterday, and one of the residents came running towards me as I was filming and tried to discredit me, but I managed to get £1.3 million out of Barratt Homes by proving they used the wrong fixings on the fire break. They used plastic instead of metal, they didn't keep to the safety certificate for cladding, which is the British Board of Agreement certificate, and breached on render thickness and adhesive pattern as well, which was condemned then by Saint-Gobain, the cladding manufacturers, not installed properly. And so my worry is for the new builds. Yes, the regulations have changed, but what we've proved here is they just don't install correctly. And I need to see that basically doesn't happen anymore. And for some reason, the regulations on compartmentation have been, very clear for a long time. But we have breaches on all of our front doors, and we've had to get Barratt to do that as well. And that was a big fight, and we managed to get that through. So there's a lot of issues there, unfortunately.
The XPS stuff, is it basically firelighters stuck to the side of your building?
It's called Euro Class E. So yes, it's combustible. It feels like firelighters, but I'm not a fire expert. But all I can say is XPS is Euro Class E, and it's combustible, and we think it shouldn't be on our buildings. And so do the insurers, so do the lenders, and so do the estate agents, who are clearly seeing buyers turn away from these high insurance flats. And that's the problem we're in. We need the remediation standard upgraded so that these partial remediations happening around the country are not allowed to continue. We don't just remediate at pace, we remediate fully and safely, and that's what we need. Okay.
Well, look, Wendy, it seems really hard to trust the word of anyone that's in who's supposed to know better about these things. Who do we trust?
Indeed, it's a really difficult question. And going back to Steve's point about these properties being unsellable because either the service charges are so high, or you probably even find that quite a lot of mortgage lenders are reluctant to lend against such properties because they've got the risk of their own security. So, and as part of the due diligence as you would normally do as a buyer of a property, these sorts of things may come to light, which means that you'll end up somebody is very likely to pull out of a purchase, and that's not the market that we want to be in. We don't want properties that are going to be stagnant, especially when we're trying to build new homes and increase our housing stock rather than have a whole lot of housing stock languish in limbo that aren't able to be sold.
It just feels like that there's everything's held back until we can resolve this issue. There are so many unusable homes, and yet there is a never decreasing supply of people wanting them, but we can't put them in.
Indeed. And, you know, this is not too dissimilar, I guess, for those people who are stuck in properties that they cannot sell, which properties are potentially no longer fit for their purpose or fit their needs. It's a little bit like when people were trapped because of the mortgages that they were locked into.
Right.
So this just feels like a repeat of a similar thing.
Right. Before anything else happens, Silas also has terrible signal. Silas, who the hell do we trust?
This is such an interesting question, Gareth, and certainly across the building industry, this is very much a repeat, I think, of what happened in the 1960s. That there needs to be far more stringent quality controls. I mean, a builder can say, well, we built this to building control standards, but from a perspective of what I'm understanding after investigations had taken place is that isn't actually fundamentally true. So I'm not a fan of legislation per se, because I think it builds a lot of barriers and restrictions, but there certainly needs to be a very strong framework and a framework for enforcing that framework and those rules, so that none of this ever happens again. And it should be very straightforward. It should be self-explanatory that a panel manufacturer would not include flammable material within.
Yeah, it just seems nutty. It's a bit like saying, I got this wonderful, I think it was a joke cup, where it was a Halloween cup, and on the side in small print it says may not contain hot or cold fluids. It's just, what is the point? Why would you create? I'm going to go straight to Michelle. She's the lady who can answer this. Michelle, what is the point of providing materials which are flammable and designed to go on the side of buildings? You're quiet. I don't know why you've suddenly. No. Michelle, we'll get back to you. Please come out and come back in again, because I really want to answer that question. Okay, we're just going to lose Michelle for the moment. Hamish, it's a struggle, isn't it? You need to.
I think it is. I'm fortunate in terms of work that I do. I'm also unfortunate at the same time, because I think there's something we mentioned previously. We carry out and we go into councils and obtain information from councils, and sadly, the information is sadly lacking about the quality of the build that we're actually sort of carrying out a search on. And we have purposely done it on where Steve lives. We've carried out searches on those particular properties, and there aren't indications yet that these properties, for whatever reason, are both dangerous, unsellable, and an absolute fortune to maintain for what they actually are. And I think the sad aspect is, let's get back to Michelle.
Let's go grab Michelle. So sorry about that. Michelle, while I've got you, what business has any manufacturer or builder got to put flammable materials on the side of a building that contains humans?
But you do realise that every oven in majority of houses is encased in flammable material. All our houses are encased in flammable materials. It's the fact that the fire shouldn't get to the flammable materials is a point. So if you have fire breaks, so we've got so crazy about insulation and keeping heat in and cold out and making buildings airtight. What we've done is use products that we weren't aware was as flammable as they were until Grenfell to do that. But ultimately what's supposed to happen is the fire isn't supposed to get anywhere near the flammable material. That's the point, because most roofs in this country have got a similar material. It's called PIR on their roofs because the insulation properties are incredible. They're now trying to ban PIR from a roof, but ultimately when your roof sets fire, if people aren't already out of the building, then you have a major problem, which is why people are fighting it. But it's not about, it's about getting and the systems now. I mean, I don't understand where the thought process is that currently now and in the past 3 or 4 years stringent restrictions aren't there. I mean, I have handed over 5 buildings in the last 2 years, and the amount of photographic evidence we have to have an EWS1, which is a certificate formed by a cladding expert to say that they have looked through all the information, they've seen the evidence. You have to take pictures of everything. It's utterly ridiculous. I think one of the things that you guys are missing here is not the fact that the standards aren't increasing, it's the fact the insurance companies are taking advantage of it. And I think this is where it's really gone wrong. I think it's the insurance companies that are taking full advantage.
So you're saying that the insurers are profiteering out of this crisis?
Yeah, they always do.
Well, this is the nature of the beast.
Because new buildings have a building warranty that's valid for 10 years. And to get that building warranty is very extensive. The amount of information that they want, pictures, they want QA through left, right and centre, fire doors need to be signed off. In a building that's got more than 4 stories, you have to have a certificate for every single fire door that's been installed and photographic evidence. I mean, it's very, very stringent on what you need to do now to even get your building warranty. So whether that be Premier or whether that be NHBC, it is very, very strict, and the standards have changed. But I do think that insurance companies are taking advantage of the existing buildings, and I think a lot of people are taking advantage of the existing buildings because they're in a desperate situation.
While we've still got him, Silas, apparently, if fire breaks had been put in place in the right way, if the right fixing had been used in the right way, you can have some sort of flammable materials. So should we just quiet down, or what's going on here?
Well, I think, again, go back to the 1960s when I've explained previously where these high-rise residential blocks were built, and they were supposed to have grouted and bolted joints of all the concrete panels when they were put into place on site. And they examined all of these buildings within Birmingham, I believe, and they found that 9 buildings were held in place with their own self-weight, which means the standard of supervision on site for the construction was not done properly. And if we know that is a possibility because of the commercial decisions that are being made on site, i.e., well, let's rush the job, let's get it finished quickly, then we can get on to the next job, earn some more money, then there needs to be a provision in place that prevents that from happening. And something as crucial as a fire break, if you're telling me that we have to have fire breaks to stop the flames getting to flammable material, I would argue, first of all, well, why are we putting flammable material in there in the first place? But secondly, where's the provision for actively policing all of these particular fire breaks? Because it's clearly, I don't think, being done in a manner that actually is effective. And therefore we end up with these horrendous situations where the fire spreads very rapidly. And as we saw the other week, we had something like 450 firefighters trying to control a blaze for 9 hours, putting their lives in danger, putting the lives of the surrounding residents in danger, and the lives of the flat owners in danger. And that just seems untenable for a position of profit.
Gareth, could I come in?
Oh, please,
Steve. I just wanted to make one point. So I would agree that you need to have test evidence, say, to back up any flammable material you leave on. And our problem is primarily because the Fire Risk Assessment External Wall, which is giving us an EWS B1 rating post-remediation, says there's no fire evidence to suggest leaving all these flammable XPS panels on. So we don't know the fire performance of the retained material. And that's the key problem with the standard, because it's not mandating the fire assessor to say, well, if we leave these panels on, what is the threat to life? But the key point on the fire shaft, there are 16-story towers in Royal Artillery Quays. The National Fire Chiefs Council said in 2019, we are of the strong opinion that a firefighting shaft should be constructed fully of non-combustible materials, and a strict limitation placed on the amount of glazing that can be used within those shafts. So we have glazing, and we also have combustible XPS panels being retained on the fire shafts. And so, yes, the insurers might be making money, but the fire brigade, in the light of 4 fires in the last fortnight, Grenfell, Lakenhall House and all the others, surely they should be listened to. Surely the fire brigade and the firefighters taking risks every day should have a right to not have a standard which allows flammable material to remain on fire shafts against the advice of the National Fire Chiefs Council. And I think that is the key point. We shouldn't be putting firefighters at risk with this watered down remediation standard. And these remediations are happening all around the country. And
if I could just jump in there, because I want to find, as I said to you, all of you, before we start this, I want to find a point of growth here. Surely this is the point where if sanity prevails, good sense prevails, we can use this as a learning point that we can say, look, beyond this point we shall not go. We need to set this right, and then we need to set the right thing in place so we can police this in the future. Michelle, surely there's some good to be had out of all this maelstrom of madness. Oh dear. Unfortunately, Michelle, without subtitles, unfortunately, I can't hear you. Oh, is there any way you can mute and unmute yourself? See if that works. Nope, no better. Michelle would have said, yes, Gareth, I thoroughly agree with everything you just said. Anyway, I'm going to pass this out. Before we tidy up, Hamish, can you bring us home?
Right. Unfortunately, I think we're far removed from what you said at the very, very start. That hopefully we'll come home to
I always try for optimism. Try for optimism.
Yes. Well, I think what has been said and awareness has been created. I think sadly, and so very, very sadly, when we had the situation with the post office, and yes, fewer people lost their lives, but an awful lot of people lost their sanity. And there are people who've lost their sanity because of the quality of buildings in which they live. There's people who've lost their life, not through fire, but because they could not struggle. The struggle was too much for them to live knowing that they'd lost their money and they were losing their sanity because they were living in a fire risk. People are aware of it. We need to keep up. This discussion cannot stop until hard work is started. And the buildings, people responsible for creating those buildings, they know it. They could do something about it. They cannot choose to just stand back. And we need to put pressure until they start moving.
Well, look, all that remains for me to say is to thank all of today's attendees, including the two that seem to struggle the most to get in because of bad signal. Michelle Carr, guardian angel of the construction industry. Of course, Silas Lees of Wiggy Wham. Should I have said Silas J. Lees? Makes you sound much more important. And of course, stalwarts Hamish McLay and Steve Day. And thank you so much, Wendy Gibson, for taking time out from the First Time Buyers Club. She really knows her way about the path that should be taken for a first-time buyer. All of you watching, I hope you find this as informative and as groundbreaking as I hope you do. Try and keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars, and get your information not from people who have got a buck to make out of you, but of those who are as independent as possible. And that way you'll be correctly advised. We're not advisors. We're just here to point out the messes that are about and hopefully point out the chinks of sunlight in the future. We wish Steve and his organization a prompt resolution to the issues, and thank all of you again. Until the next time, try and stay optimistic wherever you can and wear sunscreen. Bye bye now.